Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to the Atlanta Falcons Podcast Network. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I am joined by Terrin Waack. And Terrin, we are here to talk about the second OTA practice that we got to view so far this offseason for the Atlanta Falcons. First off, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I got a tan from the OTA practice because
Nice.
It was actually sunny this time and not rainy and
Does
cold.
your hair get more blonde?
Yes.
Like in the city? Yeah, so does,
Yes.
so does mine. I'm excited for that.
I won't wear a hat for that reason. I'm like, oh, this is my natural highlight.
There you go. I sometimes actually I'm going to shout out Joe Patrick. He turned me on to the popped collar move
boy.
now for the sunburn on the back of your neck. Because that's kind of why I'll wear a hat sometimes, because I always wear it backwards. It's just to really shade my neck.
That's
but
fair.
now that I can walk around looking like an 80s jock all the time, which is my collar popped, I may just do that instead for the aesthetics, right?
Or there were these hats on TikTok. They're big bucket hats essentially with
bucket
fans
hats.
in them.
What?
And the fans can face toward your face. And I'm like, I might look like a fool, but I might
kidding
buy.
me? It's like
I might buy one of those.
The beer drinking hats, but they
With
just have
fans.
fans attached to them instead.
All the TikToks are like, get this for your dad for Father's Day. I'm like, get this for myself for training camp.
Get this for me right now. What are we doing? We got to stop this podcast. We're going to get some bucket hat fans.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's enough of an intro. We do have a little bit of news up at the top about just OTAs and some observations. Then on the second half of the show, I will be joined by Tori McElhaney, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Bijan Robinson's kind of main offseason goal has been, what he's been working towards as he prepares to enter year 3, and hopefully how it can take Atlanta's offense to another level in 2025. But first, Terrin, why don't you go ahead and kind of share with us a little bit about what the plan has been with James Pierce Jr. so far to start his on-field work here in Atlanta?
Yes. So on the last podcast, I mentioned how James Pierce Jr. was not participating in the 11-11 work, and that was true. And so yesterday on Monday, when we got to speak to Raheem Morris again since that practice, I asked if that was by nature, on purpose, or kind of what's going on there. And he explained that it is on purpose because they are, quote, ramping him up. And I think that's just a different route that they're taking with him compared to Jalen Walker. And I think I naturally just lumped the two together because they're both first-round edge rushers.
Yeah.
And you can't mention Jalen without James sometimes
I think it's
because
totally
of
fair.
that.
Yeah.
And Jalen was taking first team reps during 11-11. Not a lot, but enough where you're like, oh, noting that. And then while James Pierce Jr. is on the sideline. So it was just a difference of planning there because now with James, Raheem said that James was participating in 11-11 work during practices that weren't open to the media. Because even though I am employed by the Falcons, I do not get to watch every single practice. I'm still limited to the open practices. And so I did not see James Pierce Jr. participating in these team exercises during closed practices. I'm only seeing what we're seeing as a media whole. And so then on Monday, during the second open practice, you did see James Pierce Jr. out there and getting incorporated with the second team during 11-11 work. Yeah,
and I think, so ramping up is something that, when I was here previously with Dan Quinn, that was a phrase you would hear a lot. Sometimes it was about an injured player and kind of coming back, a DeMarco Hellams or a Braylon Trice. Sometimes it was about a rookie. And what's always been so fascinating to me, because you can kind of quickly identify that's an NFL player and that's, a different, whether that's
that will be an NFL player.
Yeah, that's a developing NFL player or,
a rookie.
A practice squad player who's in year 2 or year 3. But you see the flashes, but with an NFL player, with a Caden Ellis, it's the consistency. It's their every single play, they're kind of making those plays and those splash moments. And then, when you get to Jesse Bates level, it's those big swing impact plays. That's the progression that you see. But even amongst rookies, there are the levels. And I've been fascinated by watching somebody who, like Xavier Watts, right, who played deep into the playoffs, comes from a big program in Notre Dame, and just walks onto the field and probably has a little bit of a natural confidence. All these guys do, to be honest. But you just kind of see that it clicks and he knows exactly what he's doing. And Jalen Walker is another good example coming from a big program like Georgia. And that's not to say that James Pierce doesn't know what he's doing or is a step behind anybody in any shape or form, but it is just to say that not all of these guys enter the NFL on exactly the same starting point, same playing field, same foundation of knowledge. They're all getting taught at different places, learning from different coaches and different programs, and you got to assimilate in your team. So that was a big kind of stress point for Raheem in his talks with the media so far, is a lot of this is just seeing what the rookies know and then teaching them how to practice. Because when they put them out there for 11-on-11 work, they want every single rep to not just matter for that individual player, but for all of the other 21 players out there. And you can't have any one player kind of being a weak link in a rep. Otherwise, the whole rep might suffer for it. So I think that that's kind of why we maybe saw what James Pierce slowly ramping up and things like that. And he's also hinted at a little bit of a unique role in this defense. So it could just simply be, hey, there's a lot for this player to learn, and it's taken him a minute or two to get out there on the field in full team action.
He has a different plan than Jalen, because even thinking about Jalen, he's not just jumping into the deep end either. They have a specific plan in place for Jalen Walker.
They're like paring him back a little bit. So that might make more sense why he's out there. Yeah, it's like he's going from something where he had a lot on his plate to now it's like, all right, focus on this, so we want to get you as many reps at this as possible. James Pierce, you brought him in here knowing he can rush the passer, knowing he already knows how to do that. So maybe now it's more just like we want to make sure that every rep that you do is being done exactly in the right way so that you are improving as quickly as possible.
Yeah, a silly analogy just came to mind naturally.
Love it.
You could have, like, say, Jalen Walker as an apple and then James Pierce Jr. as an orange. They're both fruit, but you eat them at different times and for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. One is not better than the other. It's just one might be, might want an orange slice at the halftime of a soccer match, and then you might want an apple
before a run in the morning.
Love it. Perfect. One other thing that I thought was interesting, just to wrap up the James Pierce Jr. kind of conversation, was what Raheem had to say about kind of like the rookie mentorship and pairings, and just over the years seeing players kind of naturally gravitate towards one another, whether it be because they have like personalities or play the same position and they just are seeing the game in the same way, or they seek each other out. But I thought it was really interesting who they have kind of James Pierce Jr. Connecting with. You want to share who that is?
AJ Terrell.
Yeah, right?
Not the same position group, which isn't uncommon, but
Raheem Morris just kind of said that personality-wise, he sensed a similarity in those two, and honestly, it made perfect sense. AJ Terrell was here as a rookie my very last year, the first time around, and I too kind of got exactly what Raheem was saying. He came in as a very experienced rookie who had played in a lot of national championship games against some of the best receivers, frankly, in the NFL today.
Yeah.
And had a serious kind of professional demeanor.
Didn't he use the word intense?
Yeah,
he called them both intense.
Yeah, they're serious guys. They care about their business. So that made a lot of sense, but I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, and we got to talk to AJ Terrell after practice and kind of ask him about James Pierce Jr. a bit too. And someone even brought up the pre-draft process flags about like James's character that kind of just circulated. And AJ's like, "What were the flags?" Like, he seemed like genuinely shocked too. He's like, "Okay, give me a specific. Like, I don't understand why anyone would talk about his character in anything but a good way." He's like, "I got nothing bad to say."
Hey, that's all that matters
shocked.
Right now.
It was really refreshing too to just see that natural reaction come across his face, where he's like, "Well, why?"
Honestly, what that tells me is that AJ Terrell is not reading a single bit of draft season content, and I love that for him. I love that for you, AJ. All right, let's pivot to Kyle Pitts. We also learned on Monday that Kyle Pitts is dealing with an injury of some sort. Raheem Morris would not specify exactly what that is. There are reports out there that say it could be a foot. Again, Raheem Morris won't specify, so we won't either.
I love when people talk about injuries sometimes. This is a quick side note where you just say, like, a foot.
Right.
He
when
has
it's like,
a knee.
He's got a hip. He's got an upper arm. We all do. Thank you, Coach.
I love it.
But yeah, no, that's always been one of my favorite quirks as well. So that is
we don't know what he has.
Yes, he just has a undisclosed asterisk injury. He hasn't been out there on the field. No. Don't expect him to be out there on the field. We'll see what happens when training camp rolls around. But Terrin, I just kind of thought that we might talk about like what is a reasonable expectation for Kyle Pitts going into year 5 here in Atlanta, because it seems like every year the expectations slowly build throughout the offseason. And then, last year there were moments where I genuinely was like, okay, cool, this is great. He had a stretch, a 5-game run there where he had maybe his best 5 games. And I think it kind of culminated with that 2-touchdown game in Tampa Bay last year. But he was used on these corner routes, and he's breaking open and getting like 40-yard receptions. Like, there were genuine flashes, but like, what should we expect from Kyle Pitts after we've seen kind of everything unfold over the last 4 years?
It's tough because you want to see what he produced his rookie year, especially for those in Atlanta. But I don't necessarily know that it's realistic. It is difficult to get 1,000 yards in the first place, let alone when you have 2 wide receivers who are either crossing that boundary or knocking at it already. Drake London broke 1,000 yards last year. Darnell Mooney came 8 yards short of breaking 1,000 yards.
That's a great point.
And Drake is in his 3rd year. Yes. And he had just hit 1,000 yards. And with Darnell, he hit 1,000 yards in his 2nd year, and he's now in his 6th year. And so that just goes to show like how difficult it can be. And so to always be like, oh, but Kyle had this his not freshman. I know you don't like that when I use college terms.
College anymore,
I know.
Terrin.
I caught myself. His rookie year is just like, especially at a tight end position, like it's great that he's done it. It's great that people know he's capable of it. But is it realistic to expect him to do it year after year? No.
Yeah, I mean,
What I liked, and as a positive note, I liked that he had a career-high 4 touchdowns last year. He's increased his touchdown count year over year, that maybe his role is evolving to make room for Drake London and Darnell Mooney in the passing game, and using Kyle then more so with his size, with his ability to get a ball toward the end zone more so.
So are you looking almost at the number of touchdowns maybe a little bit more than the number of yards?
Yeah, his usage.
Yeah. Okay, I like that because, and maybe the last touchdown that he had in 2024 was the most important and maybe the most telling for 2025, and that was the one in Washington that Michael Penix delivered on 4th down, and maybe, hopefully, that is a little bit of a sign of things to come. We've heard from Michael Penix this offseason saying, yeah, like I'm working with Kyle Pitts. I want to get that relationship established and get him involved because we see the type of weapon he can be. But
right, because just because he's not on the practice field, we need to remember, doesn't mean he's not here. Raheem Morris has said, quote, he's been here. He's done such a great job of all the stuff we've asked him to do.
That's great point.
And even Michael Penix Jr. said he's been throwing with Kyle. So even though he's not at practice, who knows how involved and what he's doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, and Raheem Morris said extremely cautious when talking about Kyle Pitts, right? So
better safe than sorry.
Extreme caution would be
OTAs.
Like you're not going anywhere near a field,
yeah.
right? So that it is. Again, all voluntary at this point. These are workouts. Nothing matters until we get to September, October, and that is still a ways away. So we're going to kind of keep everything realistic when it comes to Kyle Pitts and update everybody as it goes. But that is the news for right now. Don't expect to see him on the field for at least a little bit. We are going to wrap up before we get into kind of my conversation with Tori about the expectations for Bijan in year 3 with honestly kind of like the biggest on-field occurrence that happened in the second media practice availability. We'll get to why that is in a second, but Terrin, do you want to break down kind of the notable event, if you will?
There was a fight. I get so
there was a
I
fight.
shouldn't get excited over this kind of thing, but like even at NASCAR, when there was like a post-race fight, everyone's like, ooh. And so in practice, anytime there's like a fight, you're like, ooh. And so
I feel like it's almost like when you see a celebrity out in like the real world, and you're almost like, oh.
Anytime something breaks the norm, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, it's just like a glitch in the Matrix almost. It's like, hey, that happened. Cool.
It's a little drama. Who doesn't love a little drama?
And every staff feels a little bit differently. Some like the fights. They like the energy, the intensity. Some hate it and look at it as a little childish or immature or non-professional. I honestly don't know where Raheem Morris falls on that spectrum. Do you want to explain kind of like who was involved and maybe how it was resolved?
To be completely honest, did not see the fight itself. Because to pull back the curtain a little bit, with where the media was able to stand at practice, we were at like one far end zone and they were midfield. And then they also had players, instead of on the sideline, kind of like behind the lines, and blocking
like
view,
if anybody's
essentially.
watched high school warm-ups or something, like how the players that aren't necessarily involved in the warm-ups will line up across from sideline to sideline, horizontally.
Sideline to sideline rather than along the sidelines.
To kind of like block the other team from I never understood that. If you wanted to watch, you could watch. It was not that hard.
Well, it was difficult for us to see.
I was just scouting the other team. That was my job before games,
with
Terrin.
my binoculars, I'm like zooming in between
like that
bodies.
kid from like recess, school's out, just like with the little notepad running back.
Yeah, that
just went way over your head. I watched it in real time. Anyway, continue.
And so I didn't see the actual fight break out. I don't know that anyone in the media did, so we can't say what exactly happened. But all I know is all of a sudden people were like swarming in the middle of the field, and you're like, hey, 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 and like break it up. And like the classic, ooh, there's something going on. And you could see that it was Matthew Bergeron pulled away. I'm 99% sure the other one was David Onyemata being pulled away. So it was a battle in the trenches that must have gotten, I don't want to say out of hand. Like
just
you don't
intense.
know, like just intense. Yeah. Like there is no contact during this part of off season, but you never know like what's going on, like what's being said. David Onyemata is apparently a mad trash talker on the field. Matthew Bergeron has been a feisty guy since he arrived in Atlanta. Like this isn't the first skirmish that he's gotten involved in that I've seen. And so the point of this, though, is they split them up, but then you could tell the music was cut and Raheem Morris pulled the entire team together. I couldn't hear him, but you could like just tell like he was being vocal, being loud, and like almost passionately like bringing the team back together. And then there were no issues after that. You could even see Matthew Bergeron talking with Terry Fontenot on the sideline later. So it calmed down. I wish I could have seen what happened, especially with no contact. Like, ooh, what did David say that like tipped Bergeron over, or vice versa? You never know. I don't want to put blame on one or the other, but it's interesting that this is happening in OTAs and like during a no contact period. But do you think that's like passion toward the game? Do you think it's just normal in the trenches trash talk, or I don't know? I wish I could be a fly on the wall. I'd get squished in that fight.
Terrin, I loved everything about that moment out there on the practice field. I loved all of it. I loved the fact that two of your main guys in the trenches got heated, that their emotions flared up. Mm-hmm. I liked that in an offseason where Grady Jarrett is departing and in Chicago, David Onyemata is now the veteran in the middle, and he is setting a tone. We know that he is a fiery, aggressive guy on game day. I didn't know he was bringing that to the practice field out during OTAs. And Matthew Bergeron like showed his toughness multiple times in his first two seasons. The dude does not back down. So these, again, are kind of like your identities of either side of the ball. I love that they got a little bit into it on a what would otherwise be a random Monday OTA practice. It just gives a little urgency to everything that's happening. And then I loved how Raheem Morris handled it. I loved seeing, I'm saying loved a lot. I really enjoyed seeing him kind of come in, pull everybody together and take ownership. It was like a Remember the Titans moment almost, where you kind of have the nostalgia for the romance of football and like a general leading an army. And it's kind of felt like one of those moments, again, early in an offseason where you're trying to set the tone for what the upcoming year could be. So again, like, it could be rose-colored to say all of these things. Ultimately, like, is it going to matter at the end of the day? Probably not. But in an otherwise, practice where we didn't get to see a ton or learn a great deal, it was a moment that I think could be, in a grand story, if things break the right way, you look back as like, oh, that was a fun little footnote early on where you felt the vibe kind of intensify a little bit.
You and I watched that fight from completely different point of views. You're watching it with the Snapchat filter where you zoom in and all the little hearts show up.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like a light pink, the rose-colored glasses.
Just like harps playing in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like the little girl who has a smirk on her face with the burning building in the background. Like, keep it going. Let him at it. Like, ooh.
Yeah, it was, no matter which way you look at it, it was certainly something to behold on Monday out there on the field. Did I land that plane? Who knows? But it's all right. It's still off season. We don't have to be in mid-season form for many months. But we thank you guys so much for joining us for this part. Terrin, thank you for breaking down the second OTA media practice. and we will catch up with you very soon again to get into mini camp, and then we'll take a little bit of a break before training camp kicks off.
Woo! All right, y'all. What's up? Don't worry. We're fine. But now Will is in a different seat.
I'm over here.
And I'm in this seat. Terrin is out and about working on a story.
She vanished.
She's gone. But we're back. I'm back. I've been out for a couple of days celebrating my sister's wedding, which was really great. So I am playing catch up kind of a bit like all of you are with everything that has been going on in Falcons land the last 4 or 5 days. And one of the things that I really, really wanted to have a conversation about with Will specifically for you guys was a story that he wrote on AtlantaFalcons.com about the steps that Bijan is taking to enhance his explosives in his third year with the Atlanta Falcons and third year in the league at large. And Will, I very much enjoyed the story. I know it's a story that you've been working on for a little bit. It's kind of been in the hopper for us as we've been waiting to get Bijan on the record for all of this. And he finally was back from Germany, and you were able to talk to him earlier this week to go along with this story. So first things first, off the top, why was this a story that you wanted to tell, and kind of where did the idea of this story come from for you?
Honestly, it came to me. Like it happened organically, because I think part of the role of any journalist, and there are a lot of great ones that cover this team, is just to kind of be open and listen, because one of the more interesting aspects, I think, of this job that you don't understand until you are in that situation and fighting against it is the tendency to really just focus on the next question you're going to ask, and kind of get in your own head, and you hear your own voice a little bit more than maybe the person or the coach that you're talking to. And this was just kind of a one-on-one with me and Michael Petrie is where it started. And I was like, I kind of know what I'm just going to ask you about. I'm just going to ask you about Bijan. So I'm not like running through all of these questions in my head. And it was just a real open conversation. And so that allowed me to really just absorb what he was saying, and it stuck out. I was like, man, you guys are really focused on Bijan Robinson extending some of these 12-yard runs, 15-yard runs into 30-yard runs, 50-yard runs. And so start doing a little bit of digging, and the numbers bear that out. It's like, as good as Bijan Robinson was last year, there is still a clear area for him to improve, and that's kind of where this story came about, was like, that's the one thing left for him to check off. And if he does, then he's already even higher in that like elite tier, which he's already in, right? So like that's what's so crazy about this is few elite players really do still have like that one clear box left to check. Yeah.
It's interesting too, because as you literally simultaneously as you're having this conversation with Michael Petrie, who's the Falcons running backs coach, I'm in a separate conversation with offensive coordinator Zach Robinson about this very thing, about how they want to take Bijan's game to the next level by way of explosives and being able to figure out ways to get him there. And I think what's really interesting about this is you're talking about Bijan's ability, and I know Zach Robinson has talked about Raheem Morris, like his ability to make people miss is second to none. I mean, it's pretty remarkable to watch what he does out on the football field. It's kind of this like artwork. It's like an art form, what he does. But what is really interesting is they all have said the same thing. All these coaches have said the same thing, that there is a next step to that elusiveness. And you wrote about this in your conversations with them. What is that next step?
Yeah, so it's something where I think a lot of people would look at, all right, you're just natural God-given speed as something you can't coach. You either are somebody,
you either have it or you don't.
Yeah, you're somebody who's capable of taking it 70 yards to the house, or you're not. But that's partially true, right? I do think, Usain Bolt, I'm never going to reach him, right? As much as I practice and try, you can tie a parachute to my back, I'm not getting there. But it's more about the actual technique of making somebody miss, which you've mentioned Bijan does as well as literally anybody. He finished second to only Derrick Henry with 99 forced missed tackles last season. But it's kind of like that last guy when you get into open field and maybe you're not stringing together a chain of moves, which I think Bijan is second to literally nobody, like not even Derrick Henry in that. His ability to keep the kinetic chain flowing and just cut, stop, cut, accelerate, like all of that in the blink of an eye is so good. But one thing that Zach said was when you kind of have that free safety, how do we not make that move too early, which allows the angle to be a little bit easier for the defender to then kind of cut you off and recover and maybe ultimately make your tackle. If you can get right up on him and close that gap quickly, that is going to make the decision and reaction time much quicker for that defender because you know where you're going. He's got to react, so you close that reaction time. And then if you are as elusive as Bijan is, that's really all you need.
Right.
If you can just get up on a 1 yard margin between him and that defender, boom, like you're gone. And so there is some technique to this, and there is some, you don't want to be thinking. Like that's one of the things that Bijan has always said.
Yeah.
No, I don't think when I'm out there. I just trust my instincts. I feel it, I go. But it is something you can practice out here on the practice field, in training camp, during OTAs, mini camp, things like that. So that is kind of how they are actively working with Bijan to say, okay, you got everything else. Here's like the last piece of the puzzle to add.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like making, to your point, it's making the move closer to the point of contact.
Yep.
Versus
press his toes.
Yes, press his toes. That was the phrase that Zach Robinson used, which I loved. So when you're talking to Bijan Robinson about this, and you're kind of like, hey, the coaches are saying that this is a goal of yours in 2025. What is his response to that?
He's been working on this every single day.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it sounds like he is 100% on board as well. And, you know, he is the type of player where we talked to him last year. He said, I watched Allen Iverson for some of my elusiveness and just to draw inspiration. So he is somebody who is creative in the way that he tries to improve and in the way that he studies other athletes. He didn't get into anybody specifically that he's watching, right? He's not turning on the Usain Bolt tape because I don't know what that would afford him. But my favorite quote from him that is the first one in the story is, we're done with 30-yard runs. You know, now it's time to get those 60 yards, 50 yards. Again, if you're looking at where Bijan ranks in 20-plus yard runs, it is kind of right up there with 10-yard runs. It's right up there with guys like Saquon, guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, guys like Derrick Henry, right? The best of the best. Then if you look at 20-plus yard runs, he drops back to like 17th.
Yeah, so what's interesting is you did have in here 3 players with more explosive runs than Robinson last year were Derrick Henry, who had 37, Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 34, and Saquon Barkley, who had 30. Each of those 3 players also had a carry that gained at least 70 yards, while Bijan's longest run in 2024 was 37 yards. So there is a discrepancy in, I think, to your point, like a 30-plus yard gain is still an explosive, but you're looking at these guys getting 50-plus.
Yeah, your offense has to stay on the field most times after a 30-yard gain.
Right, yeah.
After a 70-yard gain, probably not.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
most chances are that you're getting off the field because that's a touchdown. And so I think Bijan offers as high a floor as any running back in the league. When you give him the ball, there's as good a chance as with any player that it is going to be an 8-yard gain or a 10-yard gain. But his ceiling right now, when you're looking at some of the other very best ones in terms of distance gained on these runs, isn't as high as where you would expect it to be. So that is simply what is left to add to that. And that does involve more than just Bijan. It does involve the offensive linemen, sustaining blocks, maybe the receivers getting to that second level, sealing off those alleys. Again, I'm very confident that this is going to improve in 2025 because all of the pieces are in place for it to get better. So all that was left was really for them to just emphasize it and focus on it. We saw how much better Bijan's pass blocking got in year 2 because he was focused on that. So given that we saw that improvement, I'm pretty optimistic that we'll see some improvement here as well.
It's interesting because we're talking about Bijan in the upper echelon of running backs in the league. And we have since he's been in the league. And like this is just the next step of his development. You know, we're talking about Bijan and it's kind of like you're nitpicking his game a little bit. But I think that's what you do with these players.
Yeah, the best players allow for the nitpicks because it's so, you know, there's not such a clear detriment in his game. It's just like, how are we just getting a little bit better, and we go from a 98 to a 99 to a 100. Like that's what we're talking about with Bijan.
Yeah. So I really, as I said off the top, I really enjoyed this piece that you wrote, which everybody can check it out on AtlantaFalcons.com. Make sure and go read it. I would honestly recommend following along as we're talking about this. Pull it up, read it for yourself. But what was something interesting that you maybe found as you were going through this case study on where Bijan's game goes from here? Was there anything that kind of stuck out to you as like, oh, that's an interesting tidbit of information?
I think all of the interesting stuff, because of what we just talked about, like he is so fleshed out that there's nothing to this level that he's really going to be working on. What I'm kind of interested in, and what we touched on a little bit with Petrie as well, was the other aspect is still Bijan the pass catcher. And that was something when he was drafted and coming out of Texas, really everybody was like, that's his superpower, is like he can run these routes like a receiver. And remember, he was working with, I think it was Devontae Adams, like as a rookie, kind of that summer between the draft and then getting here in Atlanta. And I asked Petrie, like, does a change in offensive design, because I think one of the biggest changes going from Arthur Smith's era to Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson is the way that these route concepts all work together. Like, does that sometimes impact the vision that you almost had for a player, where like Bijan in one offense as a pass catcher may be different in a different offense? And so that is something that he wouldn't get too deep into it, as you might expect. A coach isn't going to reveal too much trade secrets there. But just one other note for fans to kind of maybe keep an eye on in training camp, in the preseason. I don't know how much run Bijan is going to get in the preseason, frankly, but just keep it on the back burner, I guess, this season, is how is Bijan used as a pass catcher in this offense specifically? Because I do still think that what we saw last year was great. If you're looking for ways to build upon it, there is some avenue there. And think back to the Washington game. That missed connection between Penix and Bijan, that's probably going for like a touchdown. You talk about explosives. That's one right there.
That's one. And that was the one that I was going to bring up in this conversation is like, okay, there's this little wheel route, and it's going to be probably a 30, 40 yard. And to your point, it could potentially be a touchdown. Bijan doesn't have the cushion to the sideline. You always tell
that's the one against Carolina.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's great example, too.
It's this wheel route, and he's going down the sideline. The defender's on his back hip. He's in good position, but he's right up against the sideline. He eats
up his own cushion.
His own cushion to the point where if you're Michael Penix, that's a difficult throw
which
to make.
He nails. He hit that throw. Go back and watch it. It's like right in the breadbasket.
But if Bijan was a half yard away from the sideline, that's a catch instead of catching it out of bounds. And that's that's on Bijan.
Yes.
And that's one of those things, to your point about how his role expanding as a pass catcher, that's an area you turn on that right there. That's an easy adjustment to make. Hey, Bijan, make sure that you're not to the boundary. Give Michael Penix a little, and yourself, a little bit of cushion to where he's not throwing this to you with 1 foot out of bounds. He's throwing this to you in step with about this much away from the sideline. That to me is like exactly what you're talking about, is like an easy tweak that is the difference in a out of bounds there, an incompletion, and Michael Penix connecting to Bijan Robinson for a 45-yard gain downfield. So
that's a wrap. I couldn't do it any better. I literally couldn't say it any better. That was that, like, good night, everybody. Go home, drive safe. Perfect.
Yeah,
perfectly said, Tori.
Thank you very much. I'll be here all day. But yeah, no, Will, I thank you so much for sitting down and switching seats and letting me come in and talk to you a little bit about this story. I cannot recommend enough that people go read it. Honestly, go back and watch some of Bijan's long runs and kind of see what it is that we're talking about. That's something else that I would recommend people do along with reading the story, is go back and watch Bijan's highlights from 2024 so that you can actually see what we're talking about. You can look at all of those on our YouTube channel, Atlanta Falcons, or AtlantaFalcons.com. Honestly, just Google Bijan Robinson's best plays.
It's giving me a story idea. I'm like, should we do an essential clips? Just like,
here's
the things to get you ready for the whatever. Maybe, no free ideas.
No free idees. Yeah, but maybe check back in
later.
Cut
this out of the podcast.
No, but thank you guys so much for joining us. We have a mandatory minicamp is coming up very, very soon. I believe starting next week. We will be there from start to finish, and hopefully we'll get to see some really cool things. I know I've already really enjoyed watching Michael Penix and Drake London's connection, and I'm sure we will talk more about that at a later date. But everybody, make sure you subscribe to the podcast channels. You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. For Will McFadden, I'm Tori McElhaney, and for Terrin Waack, who was here earlier, thank you guys so much, and we will talk to you very soon.